The following program, NORML Show Live, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good afternoon. Welcome. It is Monday, July 26, 2010, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Thanks for joining us for the next 60 minutes of news, talk, interviews, information, music, comedy, and more by, for, and about the cannabis community. Coming to you from Rolla J Studios in beautiful Potland, Oregon, home of the 2010 NORML National Conference. And joining me here at the rudder, steering the ship of the show, the pirate, Jajan.
I took my ship down south and brought us some booty, actually.
Yeah, let's take a look at the booty. We do have some recovered booty. Oh my, oh my, oh my.
The booty has been recovered.
A little bit of state of Jefferson, Southern Oregon goodness. Boy, the no smoking before the show rule is really tough.
It's tough.
Some days. Glad to have you back here, John. And joining us from our virtual studio in beautiful Astoria, Oregon, the lovely and talented Cannabis Carrie.
Oh dear, we have a no smoking before the show policy? I had no idea.
It's just for me because I've found that certain strains affect my vocabulary and my thesaurus. I'll sit there trying to think of the word like, violate, and I'll say things like do bad things to.
It'll do bad things to your rights.
It'll do bad things to your rights. I decided that wasn't too professional, so yeah. Carrie, how was your weekend, darling?
Oh, it's gorgeous up here, Russ. I love summer on the coast, and a lot of people, but at least the people that are coming out have smiles on their faces, so I can't complain too much.
Oh, yeah. I had myself a good time. I was in Las Vegas, Nevada on Saturday for the Netroots Nation convention. All sorts of good times there. I streamed our panel that I was on, and they've got some coverage of that at firedoglake.com. Just look up Netroots Nation, marijuana, Firedog Lake, and you'll find their reporting on it. My moment, though, the moment I'll always treasure, while sitting there at the plenary session, the final plenary session, we're watching all these different speakers, some amazing speakers, and I'll just drop a name here, Linda Flores Thompson. She will be the next Democratic Lieutenant Governor of the state of Texas. That's one fantastic woman there. But as I'm sitting there watching these speakers there at Netroots Nation, which is, about 2,000 people, big convention center, the big, 6 to 8 foot round banquet tables, who would come up and sit at my banquet table but Senator Al Franken? That's right. Senator Al Franken sat right at my banquet table, right across from me, kind of gave me a wave, and I kind of gave him a wave. We didn't get a chance to talk or anything, but I got to sit with Senator Al Franken. And that reminds me, my favorite T-shirt from Netroots Nation is one that's got a picture of Senator Franken, and it says, "I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, 50.004% of the people like me." This is really great because he had that recount where he only won by 500 votes or something like that. So that was really cool. Anyway, Carrie brings us our hemp headlines right after the first break. So Carrie, what's in the news today?
Well, today we're going to go to one of our southwestern states that is having a dry spell, something that we're probably all familiar with at some point in our lives. We're also going to talk about California energy use rates, and you know how emotional I am. I hope I can get through this last story without tearing up. One of the sweetest victories in my mind on the war on cannabis, and we'll talk about that as well.
Okay, great news coming up right after this first break. Also on today's show, Carrie brings us our Daily Toker Tunes Roots Monday track, so that'll be at 20 after. We'll get some great blues music from Detroit Jr. Also, 30 after the hour, we go behind the headlines with NORML's deputy director and the author of Marijuana is Safer, So Why Are We Driving People to Drink? Paul Armentano joins us to talk about the latest surveys on random student drug testing, which finds out something that, well, I'm sure you won't find too hard to believe about that. And at 45 after, Radical Rant, you asked for medical marijuana. Looks like you got it. Coming back right after this.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
High as a kite, everybody!
This drug in front of me is what they call marijuana.
If we had a dime for every dime bag bought in America, marijuana would be legal by now. Donate to NORML at NORML.org and support NORML Show Live.
I'm going to light.
Roll a big fatty.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or NORML, invites you to our 39th annual National Conference, Legalization, Just Say Now, Thursday, September 9th through Saturday, September 11th, 2010, at the opulent Governor's Hotel in downtown Portland.
The war on drugs has been a core failure, and I think that we need to rethink and reformulate marijuana laws.
Extend your visit through Sunday, September 12th, and you can also attend the free two-day Portland Hempstock, the largest outdoor cannabis and music festival in Oregon.
I inhaled frequently. That was the point.
Just Say Now. The NORML National Conference, September 9th through 11th in Portland, Oregon. Details available on the web at norml.org/conference or by calling 202-483-5500.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's NORML News with Cannabis Carrie.
New Mexico's medical marijuana program has hit a dry spell while the state's licensed growers are running out of product. New Mexico's medical marijuana program was signed into law in April of 2007 and took effect a few months later. 2 years later, in January of 2009, the New Mexico Department of Health finalized rules governing the production and distribution under state law. At that time, the state authorized nonprofit facilities to apply with the state to produce and dispense medical cannabis. The state licensed producers, there are only 11 of them, can grow up to 95 mature plants each after they've met strict qualifications, including having a board of directors to oversee the production. The 11 state-approved producers are falling short of being able to supply the demands of the 2,000 patients prescribed medical marijuana in the state. Deborah Boosmeyer, a spokesman for the Department of Health that oversees the program, says that they hadn't anticipated this high of a demand and that the process to become a grower in the state of New Mexico is painfully slow. Patients are allowed to cultivate their own medical cannabis. They can have 4 mature plants and 12 immature plants, but for sick patients in the program, many would just like to have access to medical marijuana and not try to grow the high-maintenance crop. The situation has left many patients that were counting on the new dispensary system looking up street dealers to get cannabis. Under the current system, it takes about 5 months for a newly licensed provider to begin to sell their product, and with the 100 to 200 new patients enrolling in the program every month, the shortage of medical cannabis available to patients is expected to persist. The current state growers are operating on a first-come, first-served basis and rationing the amount of medicine any one patient can buy. Department of Health Busmeyer says that the law allows patients to possess medical cannabis if they qualify, but how they get it is ultimately up to them, And it isn't illegal for patients in New Mexico to buy from street dealers. Activists say that buying from a street dealer is just not a viable alternative to licensed dispensaries. Patients doing deals in parking lots and back alleys are compromising their safety and can't be assured of a quality product.
Absolutely. And I've got to award the Nail on the Head award to Matter of Liberty in the chat room. He said, they're making this so overcomplicated. Yes, exactly. They're making it so overcomplicated. And the reason why it has to be so overcomplicated is because we continue to ban the use of cannabis for healthy people. They've got to go through all these, security measures, and we've got to have only this many plants, and you got to have this type of board of directors and all this type of building. It's all around trying to keep pot out of the hands of the majority of the people that want it, right? And this notion that we didn't anticipate there'd be so much demand. Oh, really? What? Surprise! People, when given legal access to cannabis, would like some. The people that are medical patients need it, and they need it more in greater amounts than your casual smoker might need it. A lot of times they're making tinctures or they're making edibles where you need 4 to 8 times as much product to get the medical efficacy in those brownies or those cookies or whatever. So once again, we find drug warriors and people of that ilk trying to restrict the access to those of us who are healthy, and in trying to get the access to those who are sick and desperately need it, severely restricting them because of us. They cannot repeal the laws of supply and demand, people. If there is a demand for it and you make it legal for those people who medically need it, there's going to need to be a huge supply. You cannot restrict it to 5 or 6 different providers. It's just not going to work like that. Work for legalization for everyone, and then patients have all the access they need.
In Mendocino County, California, energy usage has increased 27% in the last 15 years. Law enforcement officials are attributing the increase to indoor marijuana grows, according to PressDemocrat.com. Humboldt County, California's usage has risen 51%, more than 6 times the state's average in the same time, according to PG&E. While increase on energy demands goes up as time goes by, the fans, air filters, and high-intensity lights that come with indoor marijuana gardens can use as much as 20 times the electricity as the average household, according to Peter Lehman, director of SACH's Energy Research Center at Humboldt State University. The significant rise in energy use in the environmentally progressive part of the state has some growers rethinking what it means to be green. Matthew Cohen, director of Northstone Organics Cooperative in Mendocino County, a medical marijuana collective, says that people in his area that recycle and eat organic and drive a Prius continually burn 8,000 watts for their indoor gardens. Northstone Organics uses greenhouses and plants outdoors for its medical cannabis. Indoor growers can spend as much as an extra $4,000 a month for a large indoor grow operation. Law enforcement officials can use unusually high energy consumption as probable cause to obtain a search warrant. The Mendocino growers say that the dispensaries overwhelmingly want cannabis that was grown indoors, claiming it is higher quality. They claim that Bay Area dispensaries won't even consider buying marijuana grown outdoors. Well, this energy piece of the debate is heating up as California considers legalizing home grows for personal use. One company that won't be discussing the impact of indoor marijuana cultivation on energy demands is PG&E. Their officials declined to comment, saying what our customers do in their own homes is none of our business.
Well, that's a nice change of pace. Here comes the sun, doot-and-doot-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right. And when it comes to marijuana, it's perfect. It's wonderful. It's meant to grow under the sun, people. Yeah, it does crack me up, especially, when up here in Portland, Oregon, we have a lot of the eco-friendly, environmental type folks, and then I talk to them, and they're wearing their Birkenstocks and they're recycling and they got their compost piles and, driving a Prius or riding a bike. And yet, yeah, they got the fans, they got the lights, you got spending all that money on electricity. Now, to be fair, here in the Pacific Northwest, we can get a large share of our electricity from wind farming, and some of these people I know actually have solar lighting or solar panels that they're using to help power their indoor grows. But again, this once again shows how the war on drugs, and specifically the war on marijuana, creates so many unintended consequences in so many other areas of life. I mentioned this at Netroots Nation on Saturday, because I had an audience of bloggers who work on various issues, environment, gay rights, civil liberties, and so on. And I brought up to them, the fact that sometimes people, when they find out what I do for a living, that I, lecture and research on marijuana and marijuana law reform, they say, oh, well, isn't there more important things to do? Save the whales, end AIDS, end hunger in Darfur or whatever. And I say, yeah, there's lots of important things to do, but you can't name another issue in American politics today that so radically affects the First, Second, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Seventh, Eighth, Ninth, 10th, 13th, and 14th Amendment rights that we all share as Americans. It is so encompassing, and this is just one aspect of it. The fact that we make marijuana illegal causes us to use more power, causes us to use more indoor electricity, leading to more environmental degradation. And it's a double whammy, because if you let us plant cannabis outside big, great, huge fields of hemp or cannabis, they act as a carbon sink. They pull in that carbon dioxide that's heating up our atmosphere. It would be a double win if we were to legalize cannabis from A, not using the indoor lights, and B, getting the outdoor carbon sink.
And in one of the sweetest victories to date in the war on cannabis, the Department of Veterans Affairs has decided to formally allow patients treated at its hospitals and clinics to use medical marijuana in the 14 states that have legalized it. A department directive has been issued and is expected to take effect this week. Veterans and activists have been fighting for the policy change for years, and this is expected to close the gap and resolve the conflict between veterans' facilities in medical marijuana states and federal law, effectively deferring to the states. The policy will not permit department doctors to prescribe the marijuana, but it will address the concern of patients who use medical marijuana that would lose their prescription pain medication if caught. Under department rules, veterans will be denied pain medication if they are found to be using illegal drugs, and until now, the department had no written exception for medical marijuana in the states where it is legal. Although it was mostly Vietnam War veterans who were the first group of veterans who used cannabis for medical reasons, the population of veterans using it now spans generations, according to Michael Kravitz, Executive Director of Veterans for Medical Marijuana Access. His group has been fighting to end the discrimination against veterans who have discovered medical marijuana and fought so its use would no longer be the basis for denial of services. Studies have shown that cannabis can be effective for treating PTSD, and cannabis can soothe physical pain and alleviate the side effects of some treatments. This decision by a branch in the federal government may be the catalyst for the change in marijuana scheduling by finally admitting that marijuana can be used as medicine. This significant shift in policy deserves to be extended to all veterans, not just those living in 14 states. For the win, Russ. For the win.
For the win. Yeah, it's beautiful. First federal agency. First agency of the federal government. First official recognition by anything in our federal government that says there is such a thing as medical marijuana. And I'm looking forward to see how this might play out in future court cases where people go to federal trial and they're not allowed to bring up their use of medical marijuana. Well, what if the guy going to trial is a veteran? Right? We can bring in that Veterans Administration. So this could be a huge game changer in the case of litigation. But as Carrie kind of mentioned toward the end now, we will no longer discriminate against veterans who are using medical marijuana in 14 states. But we will continue the geographic discrimination against those veterans who aren't so lucky. Right? If you're a veteran of the Iraq war and you're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, you better hope that you shipped out with the Oregon National Guard and not the Idaho National Guard. Because if you did that, Idaho National Guard, and they pop you with the marijuana in your system, even if you're using it medicinally, I'm afraid you're going to lose your pain medications because they did not change that rule. They still made the rule that anyone who's caught with cannabis in their system is an illegal drug user, and they can be denied their opioid painkiller prescription medications if they're in the VA system. So yeah, it's a good news. I mean, I don't want to, be the buzzkill here. It is good news for those patients, those veterans who are in the 14 medical marijuana states, but it doesn't go far enough, people. It does not go far enough. People that use cannabis should not be forced to live in pain for their use of cannabis. And even if they're not veterans, there's people all over this country who are under-prescribed opioid painkillers because of a current or past record of their use of cannabis. And when like I mentioned earlier, I talked about the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 13th, and 14th Amendments. 8th Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. It is torture to deny someone an opioid painkiller prescription that could alleviate severe pain in their life merely because they might have been using cannabis. And of course, those of us who work with medical marijuana know that the use of cannabis can help reduce the amount of opioid painkillers prescriptions that you need, right? But not get rid of them entirely. They still need some help. So if we are really serious about healthcare in this country, that's a stretch, I know. But if we're really serious about healthcare in this country and serious about living up to our promises to our veterans, we've got to do better than this. We've got to continue lobbying the federal government to remove cannabis from Schedule 1 and put it at least in Schedule 3 along with Marinol. Now, if I had my way, it would be off the schedule together. But, you know, baby steps, people, baby steps. Reschedule cannabis. Do not punish cannabis users with pain and torture for their use of cannabis. I think we better alleviate some of that pain and torture.
I think so.
It's that special break time. Hey, you guys out on the East Coast, enjoy yourself. Everybody else is joining you. We're right back after this.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? Reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would say to South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
And now, a message from former President George W. Bush to remind the American people of our responsibility in our nation's war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
That's right, America. Use less drugs. Put down the Prozac, the Vioxx, and the Levitra, and turn to the herb. Use less drugs. Our national policy is no longer just say no. It's now just slow down.
You get me too high. I overanalyze. If you've ever been too high, then you can sympathize. You get me too high. And I start to fly. If I said some silly thing, then that's the reason why.
It's time for your Daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420-friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Our pod-safe music is donated by freedom-loving musicians who support our goal of ending adult marijuana prohibition. Today we bring you tunes for Roots Monday, our celebration of the music that evolved into the popular modern music of today. We pick the best of blues, country, folk, and jazz with a 420 feel and serve it up for you every Monday. Brought to you by PlanetFantastic.com and Bella Blue Tie-Dye Fashions. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@normal.org. Now, here's some great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes. Welcome back, everyone. 23 after the hour, and we go back to the confluence, the mouth of the Columbia River at the Pacific Ocean, the winter home of the Lewis and Clark expedition, but more importantly, the home of the Goonies, with our own Cannabis Carrie and our Daily Toker too.
Wow, that's quite... You must have had quite a nice break there, Russ.
It was all right.
Well, we go back to our blues roots for today's toker-friendly tune to satisfy all the blues lovers out there. Emory Detroit Jr. Williams was a blues piano player who began recording music in the late 1950s. True to his stage name, he began his career in Detroit, Michigan in the late 1950s, backing John Lee Hooker and Eddie Boyd, who brought him to Chicago, where he spent the 60s honing his craft for the blues in the hotbed of the famous Chicago blues scene. In the 1970s, Detroit toured and recorded with influential American blues singer Howlin' Wolf. And then after the death of Howlin' Wolf in 1976, he returned to Chicago, where he lived and performed until his own death in 2005. Now, today's Toker Tune has all the makings of a good traditional American blues song. You got your 12-bar lines, your cheating, your drinking, your somebody done somebody wrong, and general bad luck all rolled together with the smooth piano lines and rich vocals that Detroit was known for. He sings with a voice that has been seasoned from 8,000 club performances, no doubt. So here is I Got High Last Night with Detroit Jr.
All right. Thanks, Carrie, for the Roots Monday tune. Download available later today at stash.normal.org.
I got high last night. Woke up in the bed with another man's wife. Yes, I got so high last night. Boys, I woke up in the bed with another man's wife. Oh, it was a dangerous situation. Man, I almost lost my life. He said, I want you to tell me, fella, what you doing in my house and in my bed. He said, I want you to tell me, fella, what you doing in my house and in my bed. Yeah, and all the time he was talking to me, he had a gun pointed at my head. I said, tell you the truth, mister, I was so high, I really don't know. Yeah, let me tell you, mister, man, I was so high, I really don't know. And to tell you the truth, seen your wife before. Believe me, but all your wife and I did was sleep. I said you may not believe me, people, but all your wife and I did was sleep. You see, I don't remember coming out with her, and the wife there trembling, hoping I could find some way to get out of the door. Yes, I just stood there trembling, hoping I could find some way to get out of the door. I said, if you let me go this time, mister, man, I won't come to your house no more.
Detroit Jr., I got high last night. Man, now that's the blues.
It only comes twice a day, but I don't care. It's 4:20 somewhere.
All right, time for NORML's Cannabis Community Calendar, which you can find at normal.org/calendar. Monday, July 26th. Tonight, Madison NORML is having their meeting at the Wilmar Community Center in Madison, Wisconsin. Check that out. And for information, call 608-241-8922. Tuesday, July 27th, there's a weekly medicating event at the Phoenix Cafe in Hazel Park, Michigan. Hemp TV is on the air on the cable access channel. Call 505-880-0666 for more information. Wednesday, July 28th, a patients' rights rally in Muskegon, Michigan. For more information, check out the Facebook link that you'll find at our calendar, normal.org/calendar. James Stacey's federal hearing begins in San Diego, California at Courtroom 15. We're calling for all supporters who can to be there to show your support. Cincinnati's Fountain Square Reggae Night's taking place this Wednesday at 5th and Vine in Cincinnati. Miami Valley NORML will be there. Info at mvnormal.org for information. Grand Traverse Compassion Connection meeting is happening at the Traverse City Grand Parkway. gtcompassionconnection.org for information. Friday, we have the Atwood Summerfest taking place in Madison, Wisconsin, both days, Friday and Saturday. And of course, on Saturday, July 31st, we are proud to announce the grand reopening of the USA Cannabis Cafe.
Whoop, whoop.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a good time. We will be broadcasting live or streaming live there at live.normal.org, 4:20 p.m. Pacific time in the Pacific time zone. For Pacific time in the Pacific time zone. That's kind of redundant.
Yeah, a little bit.
Oh, the break was too good. Anyway, we'll be reopening there on Saturday at 4:20 p.m. Check out usacannabiscafe.org for all the details. The new location is amazing. And for more information on all the events on our calendar, check out normal.org/calendar.
I'm Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML. Have you heard about the new super pot that's supposedly 20 times more potent than your father's Woodstock weed? Don't believe the hype. Marijuana's THC potency has always varied, even in the 60s and 70s. And the drug czar's numbers are full of, well, exaggerations. While no intoxicant is harmless, cannabis is non-toxic and far safer than alcohol. No matter how much you smoke, of whatever potency, you cannot die of a marijuana overdose. Potency is irrelevant anyway. More potent pot just means you smoke less of it, meaning less harmful smoke in your lungs. This is a prime example of harm reduction in action. Besides, the government already allows the prescription of THC pills. Its commercial brand name is Marinol, and it's 100% potent. Meanwhile, the federal government won't allow dying people to use natural marijuana, no matter what the potency. Does this make sense to you? Learn the facts about pot. Visit NORML.org today.
Starfish Designs, makers of the original Gandalf.
I'm Radical Russ, and when I want to relax, I always have my 17-inch long original Gandalf from Starfish Designs nearby. The hand-blown borosilicate glass is strong and easy to clean, and the design is sleek and sophisticated. Starfish Designs are available from Bend, Oregon at a glass retailer near you. For locations, call 541-788-GLASS. That's 541-788-4527. For almost 40 years, NORML has been the place to go for the latest studies and news on marijuana science, policy, and activism. For over a decade, one man at NORML has written and reviewed more studies and news stories regarding marijuana than almost anyone on the planet. First as Senior Policy Analyst and now as Deputy Director, NORML's Paul Armentano has written for major newspapers, academic journals, and magazines on the subject of cannabis, and is frequently requested as an expert witness in the courtroom. His knowledge and experience are an amazing asset to the cannabis community, available to you now in a segment we call
Behind the Headlines with Paul Armentano.
All right, 31 after the hour. Welcome back, everyone. We are joined today from his home in the Bay Area of California by NORML's deputy director and the author or co-author of Marijuana is Safer, So Why Are We Driving People to Drink, Mr. Paul Armentano. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Russ.
We got some email coming through our affiliates list that highlighted a study that I thought you would be the perfect person to talk about. It's about drug testing, and specifically drug testing in American schools. They've taken a look at this to get the results of what drug testing has and hasn't done in the schools, and I thought maybe you could break that down for our audience and give them the straight information.
Sure. There was a Department of Education study that came out about a week or two ago. And what it did was it analyzed the reported student drug use in schools that had implemented random drug testing programs, and it matched those against schools of similar size that didn't have student drug testing programs. And what it found was that among the students that were randomly drug tested in high schools that had these programs, they reported using illicit substances at slightly lower levels as compared to student athletes in similar schools that didn't have those programs. Now, that's where the good news began and ended, because what the study also found was that if you looked at the entire student body of schools that had random drug testing programs versus schools that didn't, what you found was the same levels of student drug use among the student body, even in schools that had these random drug testing programs. So there was, in a sense, no spillover effect. Mm-hmm. There was a mild deterrent effect among the group of students that were actually subjected to the drug testing, but when you looked at the student bodies as a whole, which would, of course, include students that were drug tested versus students that weren't, drug testing made no impact in the student body's decision to use or not use drugs. In fact, their rates of drug use were the same as in schools that had no drug testing program whatsoever.
Is it possible here that what we're looking at is that the kids who were going out for extracurriculars weren't likely to be wanting to do drugs in the first place, and the kids that were doing drugs in the first place weren't likely to want to go out for extracurriculars, so it really made no difference?
That certainly could be a result. There also could be the fact that students that were participating in extracurricular activities and in fact knew then they were subject to drug testing may have been engaging in behaviors that were less likely to subject them to a positive drug test. Now, proponents of drug testing would look at this data and say, well, obviously, these students that were subject to drug testing were using fewer drugs. Mm-hmm. That may have been the case, or in fact, students that were being subject to drug testing may have been simply engaging in activities to defeat the drug test. Right. It's not particularly hard to do. Or they may have been increasing their intake of alcohol, which, as I would remind people, is also illegal for people of high school age, or they may have been consuming drugs that are less likely to show up in drug tests. There's all sorts of different hypotheses that could explain these results, and I should just reinforce that while the schools that had these drug testing programs, when you look at the students that were tested, their use was below the student bodies in schools that didn't have drug testing, but not by very much. It really was not, it did not appear to be much of a deterrent, if in fact it was a deterrent at all. And we have previous studies that have been done by the federal government looking at a larger cross-section of schools nationally, and in those studies they did not find any difference between the schools that drug tested versus schools that did so.
Let's talk about that, what I would consider maybe an unintended consequence that you kind of touched on, and the notion that the drug testing may be diverting young young people from using cannabis, which they're very well aware is the easiest thing to detect for the longest period of time. And this may be diverting them instead to try other drugs or alcohol that they know won't be tested for as long a period of time. I know the statistics are showing this huge increase in the abuse of prescription drugs among the young people. Are there other studies or statistics that would lend credence to the notion that student drug testing diverts people from marijuana to harder and worse drugs?
Well, there's many well-respected organizations. The American Academy of Pediatrics comes to mind. And these are organizations that strongly oppose student drug use. And that would include the use of illicit drugs like alcohol or the abuse of prescription drugs and the use of illicit drugs like marijuana or cocaine or LSD or other drugs of that nature. Now, the reason I highlight the American Academy of Pediatrics is because they strongly oppose any use of these substances by young people, but they as equally strongly oppose random student drug testing practices. And one of the main reasons the American Academy of Pediatrics opposes random drug testing among students is for the reason you just gave. They are very concerned that because these drug tests are most likely to detect marijuana, which objectively is arguably the most innocuous of the illicit substances available, they are very concerned that you're going to see students switching from drugs like marijuana and then moving on to drugs like cocaine, which by any objective standard is far more dangerous, but is also far less likely to show up in a random urine screen.
You know, these programs that we aim toward children, the student drug testing, and also the DARE program that we have, I know in the statistics that we've looked at with DARE, we found that not only did it not reduce the kids' use of cannabis, but may have actually increased it by letting them believe that, hey, more kids are using pot than I thought were using pot. What are the long-term results of this? Did they follow up on these guys long-term to find out, lifetime, did they have less use of drugs through the use of drug testing?
I'm not aware that anyone has done that kind of follow-up research, and it would certainly be interesting to see it. A few other criticisms that are out there about student drug testing, and one thing that isn't highlighted very often, but there was a report looking at this a few months ago, and NORML reported on it, is that according to the federal drug testing guidelines for students, and I want to remind people that schools aren't doing this on their own because they suddenly think random student drug testing is a good idea. They are doing this because the education department is making money available to schools to implement drug testing programs. I'm sure everyone listening is aware that schools, public schools, are cutting back on teachers, on books, on athletic programs. The public schools are broke. But they suddenly have money to drug test their student body, and that's because the money is coming from the federal government. But there are supposed to be guidelines associated with this funding, and the primary guideline is that students who test positive for illicit drugs on these tests are supposed to remain, that information is supposed to remain confidential, and the students are not supposed to be sanctioned in any way. Yet, when a review was done federally, looking at the actual programs themselves, what they found was very rarely are schools that are implementing these programs, because they've taken the federal funding, very rarely are they actually abiding by the guidelines. In most cases, these results aren't kept confidential, and in far too many cases, the students are, in fact, sanctioned. In some schools, they're even suspended from school for testing positive on one of these random drug screens. That is in direct conflict with the federal guidelines.
My goodness. So I'm curious about what can be done about this. I mean, I know we're hampered by Supreme Court decisions, and oddly enough, the Supreme Court decision that set this in motion took place from a school district that's not far from me, the Vernonia School District here in Oregon, which was one of the people one of the clients in the lawsuit there that went to the Supreme Court that allowed them to drug test students for athletic activities, and that later got expanded to any extracurricular activity. So because of those Supreme Court cases and those decisions, what tools do we have to fight back against this student drug testing?
Well, I think the best thing we can do as activists is expose the inadvertent adverse consequences of these programs. As you just said, the Supreme Court has ruled, at least for now, that these programs are here to stay if a public school district wishes to implement them. That said, our best offense is to convince school administrators that these programs don't work, that they're a waste of money, and that ultimately they don't help students, but they inadvertently harm students. And that's the message we need to be sending to lawmakers and particularly to school administrators. Because in these difficult economic times, when we see school districts cutting budgets on all sorts of programs and on faculty and on resources for students, it makes no sense that they should have money or be making money available to fund these sort of disingenuous and counterintuitive drug testing programs. These don't help students, they harm students.
And how about outreach to the parents here? Because it's my feeling that a lot of this and why the drug testing remains and is so popular is, number one, some parents may think it works, and we can attack that. You mentioned that. But number two, I think it provides them an easy out. It provides a feel-good measure for parents to say, because they're uncomfortable having the drug talk with their kids, so they can say, just don't do it or you'll fail your high school football drug test or whatever. It provides an easy out for parents. So how do we get on the parents to be against this drug testing regime?
Once again, we have to explain to parents that while on the surface this program may look like it's helpful, it may appear to be a deterrent to young people, when in practice it isn't deterring young people from using drugs, and in fact it could be inadvertently harming them by causing some young people to engage in even higher risk activities to try and avoid a positive drug test result. And those higher risk activities include moving on to harder drugs that are less detectable on drug tests, or engaging in binge drinking because alcohol isn't screened for on these sort of drug tests, or, as I said, simply engaging in practices that put their health at risk. And those could even include practices that some people engage in to try and defeat a positive drug test, like overindulging the consumption of niacin, which some people believe can cause a false negative result, but in fact, when taken in large quantities, can have very detrimental health effects on the body.
Aside from the whole drug testing angle with participation in extracurricular activities, do we have any statistics or evidence that show that kids that get involved with extracurriculars tend to have less drug use in their lifetime overall anyway?
We see that children that are engaged in all sorts of activities are much less likely to have an abusive relationship with legal intoxicants and illicit substances. Mm-hmm. That's always been, to me, one of the great ironies of these drug testing programs. They take students who are engaged in sports and extracurricular activities, behaviors that are known to be associated with less drug use and less drug abuse, and they penalize individuals involved in those activities by excluding them from participating in those activities if and when they test positive for certain illicit substances. Now, if we want to keep kids engaged, if we want to keep kids from having an abusive relationship with these substances, we want them involved in these activities. But instead, with these drug testing programs, we're actually excluding young people from these activities. And as a result, we are putting them in a pool which makes them much more at risk for having a dangerous or abusive relationship with the very drugs we're trying to deter them from engaging in at all.
Yeah, that's my exact thought too here is you got a kid who might be, on the fence. He might be starting to fall in with some people. He's feeling a little socially inept. You know how it is when you're a teenager. You want to fit in. And so maybe you started fitting in with the guys that are smoking weed out in the parking lot. Maybe that's how you started fitting in. And then maybe later you want to get involved with band or football or some extracurricular. And you find that you can't because you already got in with this other crowd. So, what the hell? I guess I'll just stay with the crowd that I'm with. It seems, a perverse incentive, if you ask me.
It really is rough. Like I said, we know over and over again that the way to keep a kid healthy and engaged is to keep them in school, to keep them busy, and to make sure that they participate in extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
These programs sanction students who may or may not be at risk by excluding them from the very activities that we know have a much greater likelihood than, say, random drug testing for turning out productive adults who are healthy and who are engaged and do not have a dysfunctional or abusive relationship with intoxicants.
Oh, it's so well put. Paul Armentano, and you literally wrote the book on it in many ways. Marijuana is safer, so why are we driving people to drink? And Paul, we're coming up on the NORML National Conference September 9th through 11th. Real briefly, as we wind up here, I was just wondering, are these subjects going to be covered at the conference with respect to parents and kids and drug testing? Is that something you're covering or someone else, perhaps?
That's a good question. We're just now nailing down the final speakers and some of the final conference panels. This is a subject that we've talked about in the past. I'm not sure it's going to be a subject we will be talking about in that much detail at this year's conference, but most certainly I will be there. Most likely Marsha Rosenbaum from the Drug Policy Alliance will be here, and there will be others like Dale Garinger from California NORML that are very well versed in the subject that are parents, and we would be happy to speak with individuals who have questions about these programs or even simply have questions about talking about drug use with their children. We'd be happy to avail ourselves privately at NORML's conference for those who wish to discuss it.
Yep, I've always said the two weapons left in our opponent's arsenal are the stone drivers on the street and what about the children? And Paul, you've done a great job here. At least you've attacked both of them, and this time on the whole kids argument.
NORML Show Live is brought to you by our advertisers and supported by the generous tax-deductible donations of our listeners. If you'd like to make a monetary donation to the show, visit secure.norml.org/donate. Fill in the dollar amount and specify NORML Show Live in the comments. If you'd like to donate equipment or items to be used for prize promotions on the show, please send them to 4110 Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, number 161, Portland, Oregon, 97214. If you need a receipt for tax deduction purposes, please indicate the value of the items you are donating. Thank you for contributing to the fight for your own freedom.
You want answers? I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended Shaolin Temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Radical rant.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. It's 52 after the hour. Before I get off my rant, though, I wanted to bring Ganja John in on this because we were talking during the pre-recorded interview that we recorded that just today, a couple hours ago, but about, because I didn't start smoking pot till I was 22, and I didn't really know anybody in school when I was a teenager who was a cannabis consumer or any kind of drug consumer. John's got a really interesting anecdote about how smart kids are, and they realize, how this drug testing thing works.
Oh, yeah. I was in a program when I was younger, basically for bad kids who couldn't finish high school, and I was in it because I was on dialysis and couldn't finish high school. So basically we'd get these random drug tests in this class, and occasionally, mine would come up as a false positive. I never smoked cannabis. I never did any other drugs, but they'd come up as false positives because of the drugs I was on. Definitely the narcotics I was on, I'm
dialysis,
sure,
right.
yeah. But other kids would decline to take the drug test that day, and they would tell me later, yeah, I'm going to take it tomorrow because I smoked meth this weekend.
Yeah.
They know.
They know that they're going to clear up within a day or two.
Yeah, and the teacher would even confront us and say, did you smoke meth? Is that why you want to do it tomorrow? I mean, they knew. Everybody knew. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, so again, this idea that it would divert kids from using, cannabis, if the kids are smoking cannabis, they got a choice between that's going to stay in their system 7 to 30 days, or something else.
Or I can party on meth all weekend and be okay by Wednesday.
Yeah, what kind of choice is that? All right, let me get back to the rant here just really briefly. We don't have a ton of time here, but I wanted to talk about what's going on up in Oakland, California with the licensing of the 4 mega farms, as they're being called by some. Similar idea going on in the Berkeley area. I think it was 8 they were going to license, and they got 6 of them going or whatever. And in Maine, they're licensing dispensaries, and they're letting 6 nonprofits doing it. We had the story from New Mexico where they got 5 nonprofits doing it. And all this time, I'm hearing a lot from the small growers, right, who are complaining, oh, it's terrible. The Walmart of weed, they're making it so only a small number of people can get involved in it. And it's going to cost $221,000 for a license, and it's going to cut out all the small growers. Well, you guys said you wanted medical marijuana, didn't you? How many small-time producers of OxyContin are there? How many small-time producers of Viagra or Levitra or Cialis are there out there? How many other medical things are there out there that are being produced by people in the closets of their house and then sold to people under its being medicine? Right? Not a whole lot, right? You guys said you wanted medical. Last thing I checked, when somebody wanted to, put together a pharmaceutical company and they wanted to create pharmaceutical grade drugs to give out to people, they were subject to all sorts of FDA regulations, and it cost not $221,000, but millions and millions of dollars to get into the drug producing and selling business. You guys said you wanted medical marijuana, right? Well, that's what they do to medicines. That's what they do to medicines, is they make it so only a few people can produce the medicines so we can make sure that the medicines are pure. We only have a few people that produce the medicines so we can consolidate the profits. We only have a few people that produce the medicines so the government can keep strict control on who's producing them, how they're getting produced, and where every single little pill ends up. So, you said you wanted medical. Well, this is what you're getting. You are starting to see the pharmaceuticalization of medical marijuana, the natural outcome of continuing to say it is only a medicine. Now, I am the first person to admit that medical marijuana is a beautiful thing. Medical marijuana is a miracle to many people's lives. People are alive today because of medical marijuana. And this is not in any way to say that I don't support the medical use of marijuana or believe that the medical use is one of the primary uses of the cannabis plant. But by continually forcing it into that little box, into that little frame of medical, we are ending up in a box canyon where all the other uses of cannabis are denied to us. And the one use we're allowed is put into a pharmaceutical frame where only there's a few producers. Only producers that make a ton of money, that have the money to be able to grease the wheels of politics. Only a few producers. So if you really want to have small-time growers, if you really want to have freedom for everyone and the quality of marijuana that we've all come to know and love, you have to get behind legalization for everyone. You have to vote yes on Prop 19 in California. Only when marijuana is free for all the people that wish to use it will the religious and the medical users get the use they deserve. It is because they continue to criminalize the 90% of us who are healthy and using cannabis and don't particularly have a religious reason to do so. It is because of the criminalization of people like me that people like you who need it medically, or people like you who believe it's a sacrament, or people like you who want to plant a farm of it and make backpacks out of it, aren't allowed to do so. It's because they continue to want to put me in a cell for smoking it for fun. So, those of you who are complaining about this pharmaceuticalization, don't say that Radical Russ didn't warn you. I've been writing about this for years now, warning people that the more we continue to say medical marijuana and keep it solely in that frame, and the more victories we win with medical marijuana, eventually our opponents have to go, well, they got us beat. They got us beat on the whole medical thing. For some reason, people don't want to vote for locking up people in wheelchairs. So if we can't beat them, we'll join them. If we can't beat them, we'll join them. We'll pass medical marijuana. Let's let there be medical marijuana like it is in New Jersey, where it's severely restricted and only going to be allowed to be produced in certain, locations by a very few people. And what else is coming down the pike is creating things like Sativex and salves and all of these cannabinoid-derived drugs that will be easily pharmaceuticalized into inhalers, into, suppositories, whatever. But they will find a way to get that to you with a barcode and a markup if we continue to solely call it medical marijuana. Get behind Prop 19, get behind your own liberalization, and finally do the right thing and legalize the cannabis plant. It is the only thing that wins all of our battles. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. For Ganja John and Cannabis Carrying, everybody at NORML.org. Thanks for listening to the show. You can catch us on iTunes. Check out our blog at stash.normal.org. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Take it on one more time. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.